Hello and welcome to Talking Telecoms Week. I'm Annie Turner, editor of Mobile Europe, and today we're going to be talking about opening up the edge opportunity with open source. And I'm delighted to welcome Terje Jensen of Telenor to speak to me about this. And please, maybe before we get started, could you just say a little bit about your role in Telenor and how you're involved with the edge and its evolution?
Yes, sure, Annie. Happy to do that. So I'm Terje Jensen, as you said, heading up the network and the cloud technology strategy in Telenor Group. So Telenor is an operator, and we are engaged in operations in 8 different countries in Europe and Asia, altogether a bit more than 225 million customers. So over the last, I think it's fair to say last years, we have been looking into edge cloud, partly also in combination with mobile private networks, and set some directions for Telenor, also starting on a journey with a few customer cases, and happy to share a bit insights and experience on what we have been doing there over the last years.
Okay, thank you for that. So just before we dive in, just to say that after this broadcast, this session will be available on demand online on our website. So, okay, Terje, let's go. So my first question really is, why haven't telcos seized the edge opportunity so far? We seem to have done a lot more talking than action.
No, I think it's fair to say, Annie, that there has been a lot of talk, I think. But I think it's also fair to say that several operators have actually taken actions. So there are solutions out there on the edge from several operators. Not only operators, of course, as you're probably also pointing to. There are other companies taking positions there. And as Telenor, as I said also in the introduction, we have several customer cases on edge, typically in combination with a private network, but in some cases also as a separate edge offering. So I think fair to say also that if you compare it with some of the forecast, 2, 3, maybe even 1 year ago, they were quite optimistic on the market, and we see in reality that this takes a bit of time to mature, and I think it's kind of getting a bit of negative or maybe just reality into the discussion. So I think it's also a shift for many of the players here that you need to engage with customers in a very different ways to start discussing edge compared to typically the operators. For the very different selling edge cloud solutions compared to SIM cards and the mobile phone, for example. So, as I said, the reality kicking in, I think, and there are quite a few reasons why the market is moving slower than the original forecast. So what we see is that it's very fundamental condition, of course, that everyone recognizes the value of an edge cloud, and just to get that is what we call a maturing. It needs to be taken by customers, typically the enterprises, by also the operators, and definitely also the partners, what we need to work with in order to make this happen. So I think it's also a reality check that it's not only edge cloud by itself, which is typically asked for, is edge cloud as part of a broader solution. So if you look upon it from the customer point of view, they are typically addressing this either as part of a wider digitalization, change of the processes, so even the organization, new business they want to enter, or something else. So that's where we can see that edge cloud might fit into that. So it's typically triggered by a new investment from the customers, for example, or it could be they want to raise the safety for the people, for example, working there. So just one example of this is a mining company who wanted to improve the working atmosphere for the ones driving heavy machinery in an open mine. And the way to do that was actually to have the drivers to sit in the office, to actually remotely driving those. And that requires that, of course, you have a very short latency in order to sit in the office. So it requires, of course, a private network and then, of course, an edge cloud as well to support both the latency and the local applications there. So that, of course, is not only an investment in edge and cloud, it's also a change of the way of work with the driver sitting in the office. And of course, you also need to have remotely driven vehicles. So it's an investment by itself. So you need to trigger those kind of things with upgrades, what the enterprises are foreseeing. So that's one of the reasons I think why it's moving slower, because all these enterprises don't have ready-made plans, and then we go full industry 4.0 or fully digitalized. We take step by step, and then we engage in these use cases with partners as they see that and what they say bring value as well. Then I think, Annie, sorry if I'm having a long input on this. Yeah, no, because I think it's also important that of course the operators need to be ready as well. As I said, it's not only selling SIM cards and building base stations and providing those kind of connectivity services. You need to engage with these enterprises in a very, very different way. And you need to, of course, to just simply a simple thing as upskilling your sales teams. They need to be ready to sell these kind of solutions. So that takes a bit of time as well. So it's not from one week to the other to even to start selling these kind of things. Then, of course, if you're selling this as a managed service, you also need to be upskilling your operations team, for example. So it's quite a big step for some of the companies to get ready to do this. And then the last piece of the puzzle that there is the partners. And of course, partners in terms of if you want to have partners for the hardware, for example, partners for the cloud infrastructure, it could be partners in taking the mining case. Of course, there's partners for the one delivering the heavy trucks, partnering for driving the driver console, for example. So you need quite a few partners in order to deliver of what the customers are asking for. And it's important to remember, I think, I'm not really sure that many customers ask for actually an edge cloud. They ask for something else. They ask for more efficiency, better safety. They ask for higher productivity and those kind of things. And that's where we have to find ourselves, and that's where we have to engage with customers in a very, very different way in order to create this edge market. And that's in simple and not a short answer, but in simple words, I think on why we see that this market is moving slower than originally planned for.
Well, it's complex, isn't it? There are a lot of moving parts, and also it's new territory for almost all the parties. So everybody's kind of just figuring out what they need to do to make it possible. And maybe with customers, maybe they're just even trying to figure out what is possible and what would help. I mean, it's new stuff, isn't it? It's hard to have a wish list, really, and think, really, if we were starting now, how could we do it differently? So
exactly. Sorry. No, exactly. And sorry if I may say, because I think and then the power of the pilot customers and use those as references to others is very, very strong. To see what we can do, if you're doing in this way, we can actually improve the productivity, whatever. Yeah.
So one of the things as well, I wonder, in lots of areas around 5G, people complain a lot about this proof of concept, but often getting from a proof of concept or pilot stage to actual large commercial deployment is really tough. And I guess we need to look at how the market's maturing and demonstrating value. And, is that jump from a POC to a operational environment, is it getting any easier?
I think it's a very good question, and just to quote, I think it was BT saying that they have more pilots than British Airways. So I'm not saying we are in that same position, but it's very easy to start a pilot, and then of course, but you need to start it with a plan to make it into a commercial product environment. Then I think it's also fair to say that of course not all pilots will move into that stage. Mm-hmm. There will be learnings from our side or from the customer side that they are not really ready to do this, and then of course they would like to stop that. So we have come across a few of those pilots as well, I think it's fair to say. But it's good to bring those learnings into other activities. So it's not only just to start a lot of pilots, but also have an idea about how this can be brought into the commercial setting. And I think a fundamental, of course, part of this is that you need to be sure to scale the components which goes into here. So it doesn't have to be, exactly the same setup across all the customers, but the different components. And component could be, for example, a cloud environment. It could be, device management. It could be security, and all these kind of components must be ready to be scaled across the number of customer cases and across the markets.
Okay, so you've mentioned mining, Terje. What about other sectors like health, or where else do you see the real opportunity?
No, it's an interesting question. Of course, I think it's one of the learnings is that of course we can discuss industry by industry, but it's very, very important to sit down and discuss with each and every one of the enterprises on what are the solutions and how they want to start on this journey. So just to take one example, and we can talk to a couple of more industries later, but just take health, as you mentioned, Andy. Yeah. So a couple of cases there we have engaged in, and the first case we actually came across a couple of years ago was that there was a new hospital they wanted to build, and they wanted to run that with the mobile private network and all the applications completely independent from the rest of the world. So full autonomy was the requirement, meaning that you need to have a full private network on the campus and also an edge cloud supporting all the applications. So that was the requirement from the hospital. And then, of course, we set up that and they demonstrated that it worked. This was as you say, a pilot. They decided to take another step in another direction and rather start only with the private network later on, but that's not the discussion. So this was just one case within the health, and we were thinking, okay, this is the problem for the health sector. We were thinking that okay, it's a private network, and they wanted to have autonomy there with an edge cloud. So we were coming and visiting the next hospital, and we are asking, say, okay, so this is a solution. Would that be of interest to you? And then they said that no. Actually, we don't want to build any new hospitals. We would rather stick with the ones we have and rather serve the patients wherever they are. So they wanted to have what they call a digital patient support, where you actually are putting, monitoring equipment on the patients, whether that person is at home, driving car, shopping, or whatever, and rather monitoring it remotely. So automatically, those sensors were reporting to an edge cloud, which were processing, the input there, and in case of any kind of changing of the heart rhythm or whatever, there was an alarm generated to the medical personnel, and they could start to take an action. So that was the solution for the second hospital, put it like that. So it was very different compared to the first one. And then, if you allow me, Annie, I think we have a third one, which was actually another health region we engaged with, and they actually wanted to say that we would rather like to equip our ambulances. So as soon as the patients comes on board the ambulances, we would like to start diagnosis and also the treatment there. So that means a connected ambulance, short latency, and to get a lot of information, and also all these extended reality applications there need to be on board ambulance. So that was the third use case. All of these within the health sector. So that's just an illustration of how important it is. Yeah.
But looking at a vertical maybe is a mistake, because there's so much variety within a vertical from the three situations you've outlined, but maybe also really different approaches. And then, so it's not just about doing things you're doing already digitally in that One Health with the digital patient. It's about doing it totally differently. It's not just doing something better. So my question to you then, Terje, I mean, it's very tricky. You need to be able to scale, and yet each is so different. So how are you going to balance kind of the horizontal platform approach, which I guess is the way to go, with this really very individual thing that customers want, that companies want?
Yeah, and that's the kind of the $1 million question, I guess.
Well, $1 million.
Yeah, and into that, of course, what do we or I want to do? What should you want to do? What do really partners and so on? So luckily, take health again as an industry. There are specialists out there which are happy to do devices, for example, take these digital patients. That's what they're doing today. So they just make that these devices can be hooked onto a 4G, 5G network, and then they are ready. They've done their part in a way. We, of course, coming from a connectivity business, we can build a 4G, 5G network. We can also do an edge cloud, for example. There's a number of these companies are also specializing on doing assessment of feeds from sensors when it comes to medical applications, for example. So they are also doing that, and they are doing that today. They just put it out into a different context, as you say as well. But you need to balance this, of course, on what you want to do or what I should do with all these partners as well. And it's key, of course, for us to scale, call it the connectivity and the edge cloud. We are scaling the operations which are needed to do this. We are also scaling security, for example, which is needed to do this. We are scaling the device management, for example, which is basically around SIM cards and those kind of things, and so forth. So you need to find your positions there, I guess it's fair to say, and then you also need to have the right partners to fill up the rest of the pieces of the puzzle.
I'm also wondering about the effect on the network as we're seeing you move workloads and services out of the core to the edge. I mean, that's quite a profound change in thinking and operation.
Yeah, no, I think we see in several of the use cases that the customers want to, or it's needed to connect cameras. For example, 4K cameras or high definition, high quality cameras, which are continuously feeding video streams up to an analytics, so video analytics application running on a cloud typically. Of course, this generates a lot of traffic, and a lot of those video frames doesn't really contain any information. Or at least new information. So we have an application. I'm sorry if I'm diving into details. But you have some use cases, say, for example, on fish farming, where they want to do two things at least out there offshore, actually on the fishing nets. Is that they want to optimize when they are feeding fish. So that means that when the food is just passing through the net, they stop feeding. So then they need to, understand and detect when the food is just passing through. But the cameras needs to be submerged, so they are roughly 30 meters below the surface, and that's where they are monitoring. So of course if they are generating video feeds all the time, it will be a lot of information, a lot of frames. It doesn't really contain anything until you start feeding, and then until you see the food on falling through. And the same when they also have a commitment from the government to count number of lices on each fish as an average. And that today is typical manual work. You'd have to take a salmon out of the sea. You have to, check it. Do you have any lice? And then you put it back and so on. And you have to report this on the monthly basis. Yeah. And this you can do, of course. You can rather use the cameras, submerged cameras, to do this. But it's on the condition that you get a full salmon within the video frame. If you only have a half of salmon, you don't, doesn't contain any information. So in essence, it means that more than 99% of the video frames, you can just throw it away. It doesn't really contain any relevant information.
You throw it away at the edge. Yeah. You don't bring it into the network.
Yes,
you only
exactly.
Extract the information you use.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, exactly. But if you don't do that, of course, this will heavily influence the traffic on what the network will see. Because we are talking about multi-megabyte per second, of video streams for each camera. So you need to throw it away as close to the source as possible. So that's and the same thing. We have a smart harbor case doing the same thing. Is putting up cameras on each and every one. I think it was 4 cameras for each crane. And of course, then there were, I think, 30 cranes there. So you can just add up, how many gigabits per second of video feeds that were generated from that harbor area. And again, you need to just throw away all the useless information in a way, or no information in frames, as close to the source as possible. And this, of course, asks for a edge cloud application do this filtering if you want right away.
Okay, could we talk a little bit as well about, because obviously talking about edge is very closely linked for you with private networks. What do you think about sort of the combination of public and private networks, which seems to me is going to be a common scenario? For example, it might be in a hospital that certain parts of a network need to be standalone and super private because of the very sensitive information, but maybe across the campus, a sliced public network will do. I mean, how do you... it seems to me there's a bit of a mismatch so far with the standards there. Are we quite there with that?
No, I think we are, pushing a bit on where we are on the standards. We have a couple of cases. I'm happy to talk about those. One of the cases, which is public actually, which the Norwegian Defence or the Norwegian Armed Forces, which is asking for a combination of exactly of those, what they call private network bubble in combination with the public network. So that means that this needs to work seamlessly across both the private and the public spheres. And of course, to make it work seamlessly back and forth and have access to the same applications independently of where we are, is a bit of pushing the standards. But of course, there are tweaks around that one as well, Annie. And of course, you can start also with a simple, reconnect if you want, or even a simpler start is to have two SIM cards if you want. But that's not, the sustainable way to do it going forward. It needs to be seamlessly working across all these private and public network. And we say the same in the just take health sector in the first hospital case, for example. They started with, as I said, an autonomous private network and ended up with actually a public. They want to be part of a public network. And the reason is, as you say, they think it's better on the longer term, and a number of the devices are actually moving out of the hospital as well and still want to be connected, which is typically asking for a public network support doing that.
Okay. So maybe at the beginning, a lot of customers don't realize or don't really know whether they want the public or private or what the options really are. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Annie, sorry, just if I may. So we have kind of, and we could talk about this as a joke, but it's actually a serious proposition. Yeah. We say that our Telenor private network is actually a my network experience, and we as Telenor, we take care of how we implement it. You just as a customer, you should have your own network experience, and we can do it in various ways. And we do it according to what you need. For example, on whether it's going to be a public network or going to be an on-campus network. So that's or it needs to be a combination of both. So that's I think it's good to come with this, what the customer really needs and the experience that the customer is looking for.
Okay, and something else that sort of backs onto standardization a bit as well is I know that you've got maybe a slightly unusual line of thinking about APIs, whereas there's a lot of the industry, whether it's with TM Forum and it's open APIs, or whether it's with GSMA and Open Gateway and Camera, you seem to be more in favour of talking to customers about what they want rather than developing a whole suite of kind of, and in brackets, standard APIs.
Yeah, I think it's just to balance that a bit, Annie. And sorry, of course we are all in favor of open APIs and open architecture. So yes, we're going to support all those. I mean, they are supporting all those also APIs. But again, we are coming from, as you also are pointing to, we are coming from. Okay, so what is the customer looking for, and how can we support that? And if there is an open API supporting that, of course, that would be a preference. In some cases, we already have something which is maybe, and the customer might want to have a tweak around something, and then it's better, to go with that than to be excluded because you're not supporting what they're asking for. And I think it's important. Of course, supporting APIs is, of course, a very broad set of discussion as well. But in a few cases, it takes maybe a day to support an API. if it's a simple one. So then, of course, it's good to sit down and solve the real customer need there and then. But of course, as I said, preference for a standardized API when that is available. So, but we also have experience for that we can, bring value to rather high volume customers with supporting and based on a standard API, we're also adding some enhancement, which is then providing value to both them and also their end customers behind it there. So I think it's a combination of both. But just to avoid any misunderstanding, of course, we are fully supporting open APIs. Yeah.
So I guess maybe as the standards evolve, that less customization might be required. It'd be more configuration than customization would be the ultimate goal. But you
exactly.
Wait until we reach that point to progress.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think we are coming from a bit from a pragmatic, what is the real problem to be solved here, and how can we start solving them, and rather building on that into a more open future, which is more flexible. And I think it's also good to have these kind of proof points for the industry to use as a guidance on what kind of APIs are actually used and asked for out there. And then, of course, we really like those, of course, the Camara and the Linux Foundation in that sense, that you are also meeting, of course, software developers and get their requirements in that sense. But there are quite many big companies out there who ask their own requests and want to have a bit of a tweak, as I said, on some of the APIs as well. Then, of course, we have a choice as an operator. Do you want to be a partner, or do you want to, not be part of that solution?
Okay, and maybe the last bit of our conversation, what role does open source play towards operators succeeding at the edge? How big a deal is open source for operators?
Yeah, we are, of course, again, very favor of everything which is open, and also including open source and open reference architecture. And we think that's going to be important not only for the edge, but also for telco more in general. So it's very well, very good that we have all those initiatives there. And of course, the crucial point there, as we discussed earlier, is how to put the different components together, and who should come with which components in order to solve a customer need in a way. As part of this open source, of course, it's a question about how much should each and every one of the player do. For example, on telco, how much should we do in-house, and what should be gotten from different partners and so forth. But we believe that open source again and open reference architecture are bringing a lot of value for not only for this industry as telco, but also as a bridge over to in all other industries. So we also, as I said in the very beginning, health industries, for example, oil and gas, aquaculture, they have their own standards, and we need to relate to those as well. And we need to align our solutions and architecture into what they are looking for there. And then, of course, anything which is open is bringing up hopefully a bigger momentum as well to create interest from all the players in our industry and also in the other industries what we have to collaborate with.
Hey, I think we'll leave it there. Terje, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting.
Thanks a lot, Annie.